Archer, just like Saber, is a lot harder to utilize properly than most other units in the game, but at the same time has incredibly high damage potential if you play him properly. So to better understand how he works, let's start with his kit. Archer's kit is actually really straightforward, no crazy long essays or whatever. It's kind of like Dunheng IL, but it's just more skill points. This is because his skill consumes 2 skill points, and you can use it continuously up to 5 times in the same turn, so 10 skill points in a row. This is the majority of his damage, even though the multiplier looks a bit lower. It does massive damage ranging from 200-ish to 600,000 damage, because each time you consecutively use it, he gains 100% skill damage boost up to a maximum of 200%. And because he requires a lot of skill points to use his skill many times in a row, you quite easily activate his other bonus ability, Guardian, that gives Archer free 120% crit damage if you have 4 skill points and above. To better manage the skill points you have, if Archer has a charge after an ally attacks, Archer will consume the charge, recover 1 skill point, and perform a follow-up attack immediately. Archer gains 1 charge from his bonus ability, 1 from his technique, and most of the time will be coming from his ultimate. Archer's ultimate, Unlimited Blade Works, does a massive 1000% attack to a single enemy and gains 2 charges in the process. He actually has pretty high energy at 220, but because you can use his skill multiple times in the same turn, you can quite easily regenerate his ultimate again. Hence, the way to play him is quite straightforward. You want to stack as much skill points as you can when he reaches his turn, use his skill multiple times, use his ultimate, you gain charges, you regenerate skill points, and repeat. Sounds pretty easy, right? But the reason why it's hard to use Archer effectively is not because of his kit, but rather the team setup and decision making. Because if you make a mistake on his rotation and lose skill points, Archer's damage can drop quite a lot, but again with great setup and understanding of the rotation, Archer's damage can go up to as high as 33,000 DPAV at 2 targets and is competitive with some of the best DPS units in the game. Overall, I think his kit is really well designed. I'm just afraid most players will not be able to use him to his full potential, but if you are able to, I think he is very easily a tier 0 for Memory of Chaos, and maybe 0.5 for appropriate Apocalyptic Shadow content for now. Being a hunt unit though, he's obviously not the best in Pure Fiction, and I recommend not using him in that game mode at all. I honestly think it's quite insane he's a completely free to play unit. He can be a bit frustrating to play at the start, but once you get the hang of it, he can really pop off, and I think you should absolutely learn how to use him properly, especially since he's free. Hence, when it comes to builds, Archer prefers Genius over Relic sets like Scholar because he already gets a ton of damage on his skill. Hence, a separate multiplier like Defense Reduction from Genius is the best performing, and I found to be about 8% better than Scholar, quite a significant difference. For his Planar Ornament, there's really only one choice, Rutidon Arena, even though it gives even more skill damage boost like Scholar. I guess if you run Speed Boots, just like Saber, you gain access to Space, Sealing and Glamour, but Speed Boots can be quite awkward to run in certain setups. Main stats are quite straightforward, Crit Body, Attack Boots, Quantum Damage Orb, and Attack Rope. Like I said, Attack Boots can be quite awkward because you ideally want to use Sparkle as she gives a ton of skill points, but she only has a 50% action advance, making it really hard to run a -1 speed setup. This works better with Sunday as he has 100% action advance, but you most definitely need Sunday's S1 for the extra skill points, but it also means you lose a bit of damage in the process, and I found to perform worse than with Sparkle and Attack Boots in my testing. Quantum Damage Orb, to my surprise, performs about 3% better than an Attack Orb, even though Archer already gets a ton of damage boost for his skill. This is because the rest of his kit still benefits more from the Quantum Orb, and overall it outweighs the higher damage the skill does with an Attack Orb. For Light Cones, we have his signature first. It gives a ton of attack and very useful crit rate, but it's actually followed pretty closely by Dr. Ratio's Light Cone, because with Sparkle and an Attack Boots setup, he gets the 36% damage boost permanently after the first ultimate, since it lasts for 2 turns. This will be worse if you use units like Sunday or RMC because the buff up time will be shorter, by the way. From there, we have only Silence Remains. Just keep in mind it's conditional, so it's harder to brute force with his Light Cone, followed by Swordblade S5 and the new Weather Pass Light Cone. See you at the end at S3. I really do not recommend Light Cones like Cruising because the crit rate is conditional, and it really hurts Archer's damage if he doesn't crit, because just like Dr. Ratio, there is no hit split. So if it doesn't crit, you easily lose a few 100,000 damage. Hence, for stat goals, try to get as close as possible to 100% crit rate. If you overcap a little bit, it's really fine. It was actually really frustrating for me how often Archer didn't crit on an attack, and I had to reset a run, considering he had 98% crit rate. But anyways, for attack, roughly 3000 is a really good build, and 180 to 220% crit damage is also really good depending on your setup and Light Cones. Now for teams and how to play Archer, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth than usual, as he can be quite hard to play properly. This is because Archer requires 2 skill points, so your SP management must be really good, because if you end up in a scenario where Archer has an odd number of skill points, he will lose one whole skill for no reason, which is easily 400 to 500,000 damage at that point. Hence, to play Archer effectively, you cannot overcap on skill points or he loses damage, you can't waste any skill points or he also loses damage, and when it reaches Archer's turn, it should ideally be an even number of skill points or else he loses damage again. But before I get into how to play Archer, we need to talk about his teammates because he directly affects the setup and what we can or cannot do with Archer. Archer wants teammates that can farm a ton of skill points so he can use his skill more often, which is why even if a unit has greater buffs but can't farm skill points as well as other units, they still will not perform very well. It is for this reason Cypher is much better than Silverwolf, even though Silverwolf's debuffs are stronger, because Silverwolf ideally wants to use her skill occasionally. This is even worse if the boss has 2 phases, because Silverwolf will need to reapply her ultimate in one cycle, otherwise by the time it reaches Archer's turn, there will be no debuffs on the boss. For the next slot in Archer's teams, Sparkle is quite obviously the best choice as she provides the most skill points and even provides attack buffs based on the number of quantum allies, giving even more value to Archer because we already have Cypher on the team. Finally, for the last slot, Gallagher, RMC, Tingyun, Runmei, and even sometimes 3B can work effectively. Hence, Archer's best teams are quite similar to Mono Quantum: Sparkle, Archer, Cypher, and one more support. From what I found in-game and in calculations, Tingyun and RMC are both incredibly powerful as the last slot. RMC should technically deal the most damage because it's a 1.5 multiplier, but at the start of the battle it's a bit awkward with Sparkle because she does not regenerate enough energy for RMC to reach 100% charge, which means we have to play a turn without Sparkle's crit damage buffs, which led to the reduced damage. But anyways, when it comes to playing Tingyun and Sparkle in an Archer team, there are 2 main ways to do so. One is the Dance build, and the other an Eagle build, but without Dance. You can't just run Dance on Tingyun mindlessly, because what will happen is that Sparkle will advance her action ahead of the team, and since Sparkle must use her skill on Archer every turn, or the crit damage buff will run out or you lose a cycle, this means when it reaches Sparkle's turn, it will also be Archer's turn. He will have less skill points to work with because we lost skill points from our own poor setup. The way to solve this is to make sure Sparkle is the last in the action order, so that we can allow the rest of the team to take their turns and maximize the skill points we gain. The first way is by giving Sparkle 1 more turn in the same cycle, so 3 turns in total. So even if her second turn is advanced past the rest of the team, she still has 1 more turn right at the end of the cycle. This is done by running 167.4 speed with Eagle on Sparkle and S5 Dance on Tingyun with 183.5 speed. The second method, which I think is the easier method as well, is by slowing down Sparkle. Instead of a high speed build where she gets 3 turns, she only gets 2 turns, but she is always the last in the action order. This is done by running Eagle on Tingyun, but no Dance. Like I said, I think the slower Sparkle build is much easier to run because 167.4 speed with Eagle is pretty hard to achieve. It's like 8 plus speed substats per relic. So I guess if you have a Sparkle like that, good for you, but for the majority of the players, including myself, it's most likely the slower Sparkle build. Also, I highly recommend Bronya's Light Cone on Sparkle because it regenerates an extra skill point and even has extra energy regen, which can help get rid of a lot of the awkwardness in Sparkle's honestly outdated kit. For RMC, it's quite a bit easier because they cannot run Dance, so the only option left to maximize skill points is with Eagle on RMC and the slower Sparkle build. To play this setup, you should hold RMC's ultimate to advance Archer ahead of Sparkle to regenerate more skill points with his basic attack. But you need to advance Archer fairly far ahead of Sparkle because Sparkle only has a 50% action advance. These two are the harder rotations and setups to play, but also the highest damage ceiling teams I found for Archer. So it is definitely rewarding to invest into and learn these setups for Archer. If you're planning on pulling more copies, I will now be going over his Aegons and Vertical Investment. E1 regenerates 2 skill points if Archer uses his skill 3 times in a row. In my rotations, this gave Archer 3 more skills in total in the entire simulation, and is a pretty significant 5000 DPEV increase. Despite how it looks percentage-wise, I still think it's a pretty good Aegon. E2 is more so for brute forcing. It allows Archer's ultimate to reduce the target's quantum rest by 20%, and also implants quantum weakness, so kind of like Silverwolf's skill. My calculations are already assuming the enemy has quantum weakness, so again it doesn't look very impressive here, but can be very useful in helping Archer deal with more content. E4 simply increases the ultimate damage by 150%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but his ultimate is a 1000% attack multiplier, so even 150% extra damage boost is a lot of damage. which is why it's one of the bigger increases for his Aedagons. Finally, for E6, Archer regenerates extra skill points, increases the max stacks for his damage boost for his skill to 3, so now 300%, and his skill now also ignores 20% defense. The additional 100% damage boost and 20% defense ignore is still really good, and is the largest increase in damage out of all his Aedagons. Also, E1S0 seemed to do better than E0S1, but then again you can get his signature icon for free with 200 pulls on any battle over 3 patches. I think it's quite probable to get his Litecoin for free even if you are free to play because it's 3 whole patches. So I guess if you like him, you could pull E1 and hopefully get his S1 in the process. Finally, I have some showcases for Archer, some of my 0 cycles with different setups and so on that I'm quite proud of, so enjoy.
The bosses of greed and fear, yeah. Don't ask if I'm ready, but I'm ready to take them down now. Just like when you start, it's constantly drawing